I was just driving home after another long, exhausting day when a police officer pulled me over and said something I'll never forget. I thought it was just a ticket, but that moment changed everything. Sometimes fate doesn't knock. It flashes its lights in your rearview mirror. Hi, I'm Michael, and this is True Turns, true stories you'll never forget. My name is Brian Cole. I'm 38, I live just outside of Denver, and I run a small construction company. Work has been brutal lately. Tight deadlines, short tempers, and bills that never stop. Most days I leave the office long after the sun's down, drive home in silence, and fall asleep with the TV still on. Since my divorce 2 years ago, the house has been quiet, too quiet. That evening, the sky was low and gray, and traffic was crawling. I just wanted to get home. I remember the dashboard clock blinking 8:42 when the red and blue lights flashed behind me. My stomach dropped. I knew I was speeding. I pulled over to the shoulder, turned off the radio, and waited. She walked up to the window, confident stride, calm face under the brim of her hat. "Evening, sir. License and registration, please." Her voice was steady, professional. I handed the papers over, trying to hide how irritated I felt. "I was just a little over," I muttered. "A little," she said, checking the radar reading. 76 in a 55 zone. "That's more than a little." I sighed, rubbing my temple. It's been a long day. I own a construction firm, deadlines everywhere. I wasn't paying attention. She studied me for a second. "Long days don't make the road safer, Mr. Cole." Then she went back to her car to write the ticket. I sat there, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the side mirror, tired eyes, unshaven face, that old silver ring still on my hand. It used to mean something. Now it just sat there like a reminder I didn't ask for. When she returned, I rolled the window down again. She handed me the slip and said, "Court information's on the back. Slow down next time." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound polite. "Thanks." She hesitated, looking at my hand. "That ring married?" I shook my head. "Divorced. Just never took it off. Habit, I guess." For the first time, she smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile you expect from a cop. It was small, genuine, the kind that reaches the eyes. She tilted her head slightly and said, "If you weren't wearing that ring, I'd add my number too." I froze, not sure if she was joking. Then she slipped the pin into her pocket, nodded once, and started walking back to her patrol car. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 minutes, but it felt longer. I caught myself watching her in the rearview mirror, the way her hair moved slightly in the wind as she opened the car door. She looked back once, just a quick glance, and then drove away. I sat there for another minute, the ticket resting on my lap, the silence pressing in. A part of me wanted to laugh. Another part felt something I hadn't in a while, like the world had nudged me, just a little, out of the gray routine. That night, I left the ticket on the kitchen counter, made myself a drink, and stared at it while the ice melted. I didn't even know her name, but the moment kept replaying in my head, her voice, that half smile, and the strange warmth behind a simple joke. For some reason, I didn't feel angry about the fine. Instead, I caught myself thinking maybe it wasn't such a bad thing to be stopped that night. 2 weeks passed, but I still couldn't shake that short moment on the roadside. Every time I glanced at the folded ticket on my counter, I thought about her, about the way she said it so casually, like she wasn't supposed to but did anyway. I didn't even know her name, yet her voice had somehow stuck with me through all those quiet nights. One Friday morning, I stopped at a small coffee shop near the construction site where my crew was working. The place was busy with uniforms and city workers. It was close to the police station. I ordered a black coffee and stood by the counter, waiting. Then I saw her. She was sitting alone by the window, scrolling through her phone, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. No hat this time, no uniform jacket, just a gray sweater, dark jeans, and that same calm expression. I froze for a second, not sure if I should say anything. Then, without really thinking, I walked over. "Officer," I said with a faint smile. I swear I wasn't speeding this time. She looked up and blinked in surprise. Then that familiar half-smile appeared. "Well, that's a relief. I didn't bring my ticket book today." "I should thank you," I said, pulling out the chair opposite her. "You gave me a fine, but somehow I ended up thinking about life more than traffic laws." She laughed softly. "That's not usually the effect my tickets have." I sat down. That ring comment, it caught me off guard. I hadn't really thought about it since the divorce. You kind of reminded me I'm still allowed to talk to people again. Her smile softened. I shouldn't have said that. It was unprofessional. Maybe, I said. But it was human. And I appreciated that. There was a pause, the kind that isn't awkward, just thoughtful. She stirred her coffee slowly before saying, Rosa. My name's Rosa Martinez. Brian Cole. I replied, though she already knew that from the ticket. She chuckled. Yeah, I had a feeling. The conversation shifted easily. She told me about her job, how she'd been an officer for 8 years, how people either feared her or flirted with her, and how both reactions got exhausting. I told her about construction work, about dealing with clients who change their minds 100 times, and about the quiet house I go back to at night. You live alone? She asked. Yeah. Divorced 2 years. No kids. My ex moved to Seattle. I got the house, she got the cat. Maybe that's why it's so quiet. Rosa smiled gently. I get it. I went through something similar last year. Guess we both know what it's like to start over. We talked for almost an hour. The noise of the coffee shop faded into the background. The hum of espresso machines, the chatter, the sound of rain tapping on the window. It felt natural, like catching up with someone I should have known long ago. When she finally glanced at her watch, her face changed back to that calm professionalism. I should get going. My shift starts in 15 minutes. I stood as she gathered her things. Hey, thanks for not arresting me for bad coffee jokes. She smiled. You're improving. Then, after a small pause, added, maybe next time, you buy the coffee. Deal, I said. We stepped outside together. The air smelled like wet asphalt. She put on her jacket and nodded toward her patrol car parked down the street. Take care of yourself, Brian. And drive like someone's watching. I laughed. You probably are. She gave me one last smile before walking away, her radio crackling faintly as she reached the car. I stood there for a moment, watching the taillights disappear into the rain. The drive back to work felt strangely light. The day that had started as ordinary now carried something new, like I'd opened a window that had been shut for years. That night, I found myself checking my phone, half hoping a message might appear, though I hadn't even asked for her number. It was ridiculous, I knew, but there was something about her, straightforward, grounded, and quietly kind. I looked at the ticket again, still lying where I'd left it. For the first time, I smiled at it. It wasn't just a reminder of a fine anymore. It was the reason I'd met someone who made me feel alive again. Over the next few days, I started noticing small changes in myself. I shaved regularly again. I stopped skipping breakfast. Even the silence in my house didn't feel so heavy. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something. But for the first time in a long while, I found myself hoping there would be a next time. It was a cold Tuesday night, the kind that wraps the city in silence. I'd fallen asleep on the couch again, TV flickering quietly, when a sharp knock on my door woke me. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. Then the knock came again, louder. When I opened the door, 2 police officers were standing on the porch. One of them was holding a notepad, the other shining a flashlight toward my car parked by the curb. The older officer spoke first. Sir, sorry to wake you. There's been a minor accident. A vehicle slid on the wet road and hit your car. No one's hurt. I rubbed my eyes, still half asleep. You've got to be kidding, I muttered, stepping outside. The night air hit me like cold glass. My car's rear bumper was pushed in slightly. Nothing major, but enough to make me sigh. Then I heard a familiar voice behind the patrol car. I told you it's not that bad. I turned. Our OSA was there, clipboard in hand, hair tied back under her cap. Even in the dim yellow streetlight, I recognized her immediately. She looked surprised when she saw me. Mr. Cole, I let out a small laugh. Officer Martinez, you really do patrol everywhere, don't you? Her lips curved into a restrained smile. Guess I have a habit of running into the same people twice. The older officer excused himself to talk to the driver who had hit my car, leaving us standing by the hood of the cruiser. She began filling out a form, asking the usual questions: insurance, registration, any damage inside the vehicle. Her tone was calm, professional, but there was a warmth beneath it that hadn't been there the first time. You okay? She asked quietly. Yeah, just a little tired. You caught me between dreams. She smiled faintly. Could have been worse. At least you're not the one in handcuffs tonight. I laughed. Not yet. She looked up from her notepad, eyes meeting mine for a second longer than necessary. You always joke when you're stressed? Pretty much. Keeps me from losing it. She nodded, still writing. It's not a bad habit. When the other officer returned, Rosa handed him the clipboard and said she'd finished the paperwork in the car. I watched her walk back to the patrol vehicle, her shoulders squared, focused. For some reason, I didn't go back inside. I stood there under the streetlight, listening to the faint hum of the engine and the low murmur of voices on the radio. A few minutes later, she stepped out and walked over to me again. All set. You'll need to call your insurance in the morning, but it's a clean report. No major damage. Thanks, I said. And thanks for waking me instead of towing it away. She chuckled. You're welcome. Though I'm pretty sure you were sleeping through an earthquake. I was. And now I'm awake thinking how weird it is that you keep showing up in my life. Her expression softened. Maybe the universe just thinks you need supervision. Maybe it thinks I need coffee. That made her laugh, genuine, warm. Then she paused, looking down at her clipboard, pretending to adjust a page. Careful what you wish for, Brian. I tilted my head. Was that an invitation? She didn't answer right away. The street was quiet now, just the distant sound of tires on wet pavement. Then she said, maybe, if you keep your speed under 55. Before I could say anything, her radio crackled. She sighed, muttered something about a disturbance nearby, and nodded toward her car. Duty calls. Again. Always, I said. She started to walk away, then turned back, her face half lit by the cruiser's headlights. You should probably get some sleep. And don't worry about the car, it's just a dent. Yeah, I said. Just a dent. She hesitated, as if wanting to add something, then shook her head and got into the car. A second later, the lights flashed once, and she drove off. I stood there until the sound of the engine faded down the street. The night felt different, quieter, but not empty. When I finally went back inside, the ticket from weeks ago was still on the counter, next to the untouched mail. I picked it up, smiled, and set it aside. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned, opened the message. Next time, coffee's on me. I stared at the screen, my tiredness suddenly gone. I didn't know whether to laugh or text back, so I didn't. I just sat there, grinning like a fool in an empty kitchen at midnight. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and steady. I watched it slide down the window, thinking how strange life could be, how a speeding ticket and a midnight accident could turn into something that felt almost like hope. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't reply to her message that night. I must have read it 10 times, smiling like an idiot, but I didn't know what to say. The next morning, I typed out a dozen different responses, some too formal, some too forward, and deleted them all. Finally, I just wrote, deal. Simple. Honest. She answered 2 minutes later. Saturday, 10 a.m., Harbor Cafe. By Saturday morning, I was more nervous than I wanted to admit. I hadn't been on what could even remotely be called a date in almost 3 years. I shaved twice, changed shirts 3 times, and got there 15 minutes early like a teenager. When she walked in, it felt like the noise in the cafe dimmed. She wasn't in uniform this time, just a white blouse tucked into dark jeans and a soft brown jacket. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders, and for a second I forgot how to greet her. Hey, Officer Martinez, I said, standing up awkwardly. She grinned. Just Rosa today? You're safe. We ordered coffee, sat by the window, and started talking. At first, it was light, work stories, small talk, harmless jokes. She told me about traffic stops gone wrong, about people who tried to talk their way out of tickets with absurd excuses. I told her about clients who thought construction deadlines were suggestions. But after a while, the tone shifted. We stopped joking. She stirred her coffee for too long, then finally said quietly, You mentioned before that your divorce hit hard. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? I took a breath. We grew apart, I guess. Years of routine, long work hours, missed dinners. Then one morning, I realized we hadn't laughed together in months. She met someone else. I can't blame her for leaving. I was barely there. She nodded slowly, eyes soft but serious. I get that. My ex wasn't unfaithful, but he made me feel invisible. Said I was too focused on the job, that I brought the uniform home with me. One day he packed and left. No big fight, no goodbye, just a note on the counter. We sat in silence for a moment, both looking out the window at people walking by. There was something comforting about the honesty between us. No pretense, no pretending to be okay. I think that's why I said that stupid line about your ring, she finally said, smiling a little. It was half a joke, half something else. I didn't expect to see you again. I'm glad you did, I said softly. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked down at her cup. You know, it's weird. I deal with people all day, angry drivers, frightened teenagers, victims, sometimes criminals, and I can read almost anyone. But you, she trailed off. You're hard to read. Maybe I'm still figuring myself out, I replied. But I'll tell you this. I feel calmer around you than I have in a long time. She smiled then, not that professional smile I'd seen before, but something warm, genuine. That's a nice thing to hear. The conversation carried on easily after that. We talked about simple things. Our favorite music, the best coffee in the city, her childhood in New Mexico, my dream to someday fix up an old cabin in the mountains. Time seemed to move differently around her. After 2 hours, she glanced at her phone and sighed. Duty calls again. I've got the afternoon shift. Figures, I said with a small laugh. The city can't run without you. She stood, grabbed her jacket, and hesitated. Brian, I don't usually mix work and personal life, but I'd like to see you again, outside of coffee. Then let's make it dinner, I said quickly. And this time, I'll pay before you can flash your badge. She laughed. It's a date then. As we walked out, the air was crisp, and the sunlight caught the edges of her hair. At her car, she stopped, turned to me, and reached out. Her hand brushed mine lightly, just a brief touch, but it was enough to stop everything around us for a second. I'm glad you didn't text something stupid that night, she said with a grin. I almost did, I admitted. You would have written me a ticket for bad flirting. Probably, she said, smiling as she opened the car door. But maybe I would have let you off with a warning. She got in and drove away, leaving me standing there with that ridiculous grin again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of nerves, but because my mind kept replaying the afternoon. The way she looked when she talked about her past, the honesty in her eyes, the way her hand had rested against mine for just a second too long. I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to be better, not to impress her, but because she made me remember that I still could be. I didn't know where it was heading, or what would come next. But for the first time since my marriage ended, I was looking forward to tomorrow. 3 months had passed since that coffee. Somehow, Rosa had become part of my routine. Text messages in the morning, short calls during her breaks, and late dinners whenever our schedules aligned. It wasn't fast, it wasn't dramatic. It was slow, real, the way something steady builds after two people stop pretending they aren't lonely anymore. I had learned her habits. The way she took her coffee with too much sugar, the way she hummed quietly before answering her radio, and how she always